Hi, welcome to another Ferndale Live, possibly last one of the year. Nice to see some people there. Tonight we're going to be talking about Christmas houseplants, because that often causes a lot of problems for people. And we're going to give some tips there so you know what to do. And if you haven't chosen your plants yet, particularly for presents, then we're going to talk about that. Going to talk a little bit about winter planning, what you can be doing in your garden. I'm going to mention the B word, which is Brexit, because it might be interesting for some of you to know that next year there may be some issues coming up, but not too serious. We'll work through them. A little bit on Christmas trees, how to look after them. It could be a tricky year because it's been so mild, and a lot of people have started putting their trees up earlier. So how long will they last? Will they get through to Christmas? A little bit about spring. And towards the end, I'm going to do something on gifts that you might be thinking of for other people, because what else do you get for them? And we'll go from there. If you've got any questions, you can put them into the comment box. I will see them pop up here, and I'll answer them for you. So let's get going. There is one houseplant that causes the most concern and the most difficulty for many people, but it is typically the houseplant for Christmas, and it's the most amazing poinsettia. So, and often in red, but I've picked a beautiful white one here. This one happens to be grown locally. British grown often very good because they're grown a little bit cooler than the ones that come from the continent. These are actually quite tender plants. They come from Mexico. So if you know anything about Mexico, although there's mountains and they get cold there, a lot of the growing conditions are actually quite warm, so that they get a more constant temperature. Now, it's fair to say that in environments where there are deserts, it gets cold at night, but these don't particularly grow there. Now, you may have seen poinsettias growing naturally in places like Tenerife when you go on holiday, where they get to about 6 feet tall. So these are varieties that have been bred in California to be smaller. A lot of work being done in Germany as well. And the Germans have a great name for this. They call this the Christmas star rather than the poinsettia, which we call it over here, which because of these sort of star-like flowers. This is actually the flower in the middle, this little yellow thing. These are actually leaves, which we call bracts. And the bracts actually are these, it's just a modified leaf that turns this color. To get them to this stage for Christmas, the growers actually have to darken their greenhouses to make them turn, because if you grew them naturally, they would grow right through until the summer, and during about Easter time they start to color up, because that's the length. They like the dark nights in the winter, but they're quite a bit tricky to grow if you get them in the wrong conditions. They're actually good for modern houses because they actually do like central heating, and they like double glazing, because what that gives our homes is a more constant temperature, although you probably don't heat at night. But what it also does is it's not so drafty as old-fashioned houses. So old houses quite good for azaleas and cyclamen if you give them the light, but poinsettias will love the modern day modern house. Secret is it's this bit with the watering. So don't stand them in cold water. So if you're going to water, tepid water. They don't like to be really wet. So we found the best way to water them is to dunk them, but you literally dunk in and dunk out. It's that quick. So the water can get in there, but you're not holding it underwater till the bubbles stop rising. That works with azaleas, which I'll talk about in a minute, but not on poinsettias. So if you can keep them out of a draft, keep them in relatively warm conditions, and don't dunk them and stand them in water for ages. Or if you've got them in a pot cover, don't leave water in the pot cover. Let them drain on the draining board. You will get them right through to the next Christmas. And most people don't, but you can do that. So poinsettias are okay if you know what you're doing. So it's no cold drafts, no cold water on watering, and a more constant temperature, which you will get with central heating, which is good. So one of the classic houseplants in the past has been azaleas, and people have gone off these because they don't think they last very long. But there's this variety called Hortino, which actually the flowers last for 50 days. So look out for that variety because it's really good and quick. And the other plant that's typically Christmas, this is quite a big one, is the Christmas cactus. Now, the Victorians called this the Christmas cactus, although it's actually not a cactus. It's actually from the tropical rainforest. So don't leave this one bone dry. It needs to be kept moist, and again, tepid water is a good idea in the winter, and they will go for years. This is a nice bushy big one from a few years, been grown, this one, but not a cactus, although we call it Christmas cactus. and we'd probably carry on calling it that. A plant that's become quite popular and quite good at Christmas because it's red is the Anthurium, and this one's quite a lovely dark leaf variety, but this will tolerate very good the heat and dryness of a central heated house. So if you want a long-lasting plant that also has lovely leaves when it's finished flowering, that's the flower, and again this is a modified leaf. These will flower for months and months. Not the normal traditional plant for Christmas, but he's becoming more popular. The other very popular plant at Christmas is the Phalaenopsis, or the moth orchid. Secret with these, they don't like to be stood in water, just like the poinsettias. They like the constant temperature that you get in a central heated house. And also, again, no drafts. But these mustn't dry out. But the best thing to do is to stand them in water up to here. Don't dunk them because all the compost floats out. Stand them in water for 15 minutes, put it on the draining board, and let it dry out. Again, when it goes in a pot cover, don't have water in the bottom. So drain it on the draining board first, and that'll be the best thing to do. But those flower for well, actually, we've got one in the kitchen that's flowering for the second time. It was one we got last December. It's flowered right through the summer, stopped flowering in September, sent new shoots out and flowered again, and it's been fantastic. They love humidity. They're from the tropical rainforest. So what's the classic thing about tropical rainforest? Constant temperature, high humidity. So kitchens and bathrooms, they're perfect. If you've got them in the living room, just mist them every day, and it just keeps the humidity up. So if you want to looking for something a little bit different, this is actually an orchid, which you would sort of happily buy not in flower, because this is actually the plant that the flavored vanilla pods come from. It's a type of orchid. So if you want something a little bit different, and you know somebody who loves a challenge, because it's not the easiest plant to grow, but you don't see this very often. And so it's a climbing plant, as you can see, has orchid type flowers on it, and they're followed by the seed heads, which are the vanilla pods, and you can then use them on your own for your cooking. This year, this has been a bit of a hit. So this is the amaryllis, which is, that big flower that has the big trumpet on the top, trumpet red flower. This year, they're coming with their own little socks, and these have been very popular. But this is a clever idea on a growing system because the bulb is dipped in wax. Okay, here. Any bulb, whether it's a daffodil or a tulip, all their energy is already in the bulb when you buy them. And you can see the flower buds here already coming through. You don't have to do anything. When the wax is on them, you don't have to water them. They've pushed a little metal stand in the bottom, so they'll stand upright. And you can sit them on your windowsill. I would just turn them every day so that they don't bend towards the light. And they will flower completely, quite happily. The wax stops them drying out. And this year, some of them have got a variety of little jumpers for Christmas. It's actually Christmas jumper day today for Save the Children, I think it is. So it's quite appropriate. And we've got some more coming with like Christmassy themes on, but I'm sure there's some people out there who think that's absolutely amazing. Bottle gardens are very popular. But this is a very little simple idea. There's lots of bigger ones around, but we quite like this one because it's got a light in the top. So you can switch it on. Can't quite see that in here. Let's move it into the dark. It's a bit darker over there. There we go. So you can see that the light is on it. Small growing plants in a terrarium, ready planted. Another good gift if you want to give that as somebody as a gift or treat yourself. So that's just a few tips on houseplants. If you've got any other questions on houseplants while we're going through, just type them in the comments box. If you feel happy to share this with your friends, we'd be delighted if you did that. And they can watch the whole thing again afterwards because it stays on the website or on Facebook even. Now, if you're doing presents for people, one of the things you can do, which is quite good fun because it adds that personal touch, is planting your own container. So you could do an outdoor container that's got a combination of plants in. So this is a little thing called a Gaultheria. It's an evergreen, has red berries on it. But we've got here ready potted hyacinths, which are very traditional at Christmas, and then also the tete-a-tetes. You can grow those indoors on the windowsill if you want to, or you can plant them with outdoor plants and put them in a pot, and you can see how quickly you can create something very simple, and you've done it yourself. So you choose a pot. I'll choose a pot with holes in the bottom, which is outside so it can drain. You can plant it now, it can stay outside on your patio, and you don't need to bring it in, and you can bring it in at the last moment. So what do we get to? Yeah. Now, just going back to houseplants, we're getting a lot of people asking about where's your houseplant compost, and Our advice is do not repot houseplants in winter. Even with the central heating, if the new compost in the pot is at all wet and cold, it will rot the roots of the plant. So if the plants are falling over, which is often the reason people want to do it, stand the plants in a bigger pot cover and even wedge them in with something, and keep them like that until about April, and repot in April. April's a lovely month for repotting because the weather's so much warmer. The plants want to grow actively and the roots will grow into the compost quickly. So I want to dedicate April to be, from now on, National Houseplant Repotting Month. You don't have to do it every year, but don't repot now. It will be a disaster for most people, including me. I've done it. We've repotted at this time of year and it causes all sorts of problems. So let's have a quick think about the garden and what you could be doing now. It's becoming very wet. It's not as wet as last year because if you remember, we had floods in this area last year, but it's becoming wetter. So you can still cut your grass. I've got to do mine, and if you set the blades high enough, which is really important in the winter, you can still, particularly with a rotary mower, you can still cut the grass. It'll also chop up any leaves that are still sat there. If you've got leaves on, you should rake those off. But this is a good time of year to be thinking about next year. So first of all, from your home, look from the point of the house where you look most often. It could be the kitchen windowsill where you're doing the washing up, or it could be where your favorite seat is. And look at the spots that are actually a bit boring, and then have a think about, in January, possibly after Christmas, the Christmas rush is over for you, come and find some plants that you can put in a group together. So things like Healy-bores and evergreens that create a little colourful area that you can look at when you sat or you stood at the window. And also, don't forget, as you arrive at your house, planting for the winter as you arrive to the house is really good, because that might be the only part of the garden you go in and out of, up your drive or up your path. So be looking at the things that will be flowering from this point of view. The Healy-bores, there's some really good varieties from Germany now that start flowering in November and flower through to the end of February, March time. So look out for those. I mentioned Brexit, which is a bit of an issue for many, and you're starting to hear now the problems with the ports. That is going to affect plant imports, and we're all a bit concerned because of the paperwork and the time it's going to take. There's going to be a new inspection system set up in the UK because we won't be able to use the European system at the moment. So plants will get inspected, which is great because we need to keep the diseases that are spreading through Italy at the moment out. But that may cause some shortages next year. So if there are certain things you see a little bit out of season that you perhaps would normally buy later on, I would buy them earlier, because some of them may not be available later. If you've got a real Christmas tree this year, that could be a little bit of a problem, because we've started Christmas early this year. We've all been encouraged ourselves to actually brighten our homes up and get going early, because it's been such a miserable year for many reasons. But if a Christmas tree's been in for a while, the longer than normal, a real one that's cut, then it may be a problem near Christmas. Make sure you keep them well watered. Now, you're going to hate me for this if you put your tree up, but the big secret is to chop the bottom inch off, because it's like a bunch of flowers. You know, when you get flowers home, they sometimes say cut the bottom of the stems off. Well, it's the same, unfortunately, with Christmas trees, because the holes bung up and the water can't get in. If there's a chance you can do it with 2 or 3 of you afterwards, fine. You could actually perhaps even cut the bark off if you can get inside the stand. That actually, just thinking while I'm talking, that may also do the same thing, because it'll open up some of the tissues that absorb the moisture. But then keep them well watered. They could use about 1 litre of water a day, so bear that in mind. Central heating is good for poinsettias and it's good for orchids, but it may not be good for a Christmas tree. So let's keep those going with lots of water. We've got people chomping at the bit to get going on seed sowing and buying seeds and so on, and the seeds are arriving back in garden centres now, and ours included next week. But don't sow too early. Well, in January, we'll go through some of the seed sowing tips that I think we should use around here, because we're not in. You see, I'll just give you an example. On the back of a packet of seeds, like tomatoes, it'll say sow from January to March. If you haven't got a greenhouse to put them in, anything you've sown in January won't have anywhere to go. But we'll go back onto that later. I'm just going to touch on, because I don't want to keep it's a Friday night, and I'm sure you've got loads of things to do and watch, on other sorts of presents that you could get for people. Because we do find we get a lot of customers coming in buying presents for their relatives and friends because they're keen gardeners. Now, if you're an indoor gardener, we've been putting together some really handy items. So, you know, a little watering can that you can leave actually out with water in it that looks reasonable as well is good because it'll stay at room temperature. So when you come to water, you're not putting cold water out of the tap on. So the stainless steel ones are good. They don't mark, and obviously you know about stainless steel as much as I do. And that's a really useful. You can get the plastic bottle ones. This is aluminium and metal, aluminium and plastic tops, a little spray. And again, we talked about mist in orchids. Have those nearby, and actually you can start to see that they don't look too bad together. So those are some ideas. Now, for the keen houseplant gardener, how about a little tool set? So I'm not sure the rake's absolutely the most useful thing for houseplants inside, but the little trowel and particularly the snips are very good because the ability for a fine pair of points to get in and actually snip off a dead leaf without damaging everything else is really good idea. It comes in a little stand so they don't look too unattractive at home. I think the wood goes at the back. I can't remember on this one, but nice little set there, little sharp edges there, which can be useful for opening compost bags and things like that. Talking of snips, this set of snips here from Bergen & Ball, which is a Sheffield company, it's quite a renowned design by lots of manufacturers. But again, for outside, these narrow points are really good for deadheading roses. They're good for just that general snipping. You often don't need a big pair of secateurs for a lot of our gardening nowadays, but a pair of snips is really good. This Florabright range is such a good idea because this pair of secateurs has got green handles, and it's very easy to put them down or drop them in the compost heap and not notice them. Whereas if you've got bright lime green, like fluorescent yellow, I suppose you call that, and there's also a bright orange pair, quite handy for using in the gardens. And if you're a bit poor on site, you can see where you've got them. But the pair of those snips is probably one of the most useful things to have around the house. Now, there are lots of secateurs out there. You can buy a pair of secateurs that looks a bit like these for somewhere from about £5 upwards. If you want a pair that works regularly, I wouldn't do that. Go from about £15 up to £30 for a decent pair that's going to last a long time. So Bergen & Ball, again, local business. They don't manufacture these themselves, but they do. They're involved in the design and the type of metal. So I'll just touch on that one first. This is a pair of secateurs for a small hand, because you'll find on some of the big types, which I'll show you on the other. My hands are just sort of medium, but with the really big ones, if you've got small hands, actually you have to stretch over to close them. Whereas this one's quite a nice small pair, so it's good, and you can slip them in an outdoor pocket. This has got a Teflon coated blade. That's always quite good, but it's really good steel as well, so it holds the edge, so you're pruning well. Little thing to note there, you see that little dimple in the edge of the blade when my finger is there? You can see it better there. That's for cutting wire. So don't ever use this part of the blade cutting wire. If you need to cut wire, use that bit down there, because wire will damage the blade, and you need to keep that sharp, because if you have snags, one, it makes it hard for you, but if you have snags in there, it snags on the plants, and then you can get infection in some of them. So they're always look for secateurs that have got these little wire cutters in there. So that's a Teflon coated blade, and those retail at £17. And this is a more semi-professional pair. It's a fairly small pair as they go, but it's much wider on the hand, you see there, so it's perhaps not suited to everybody, but you can obviously hold them like that. This hasn't got a Teflon coated blade, but this has got a much better blade. This will hold the edge even better than the other pair, although those are very good. As you go down the price, the blades get worse, and you end up with blades that either that cross here, so you can't actually cut anything through them because they don't actually form a scissor pair. You know, they need to be cutting really like a pair of scissors, or the blades just are too blunt to cut. Now, you can do this if you bring a piece of paper on. We won't object. You might have to ask us if you can take them out of the packet, but a good pair of garden shears, I haven't done this before to test, so let me make sure it does work. You should be able to cut them when you get them new. So the good ones will cut a pair of piece of paper. That's what I'm trying to say. And a good little added gadget. This could be about just a good little present for somebody. And it's a sharpening edge, just to run down the blade for about £10. Has a little cover for it as well, bright green, so you can keep your eye on it. And it's always good to generally just run an iron, these sharpening irons, just down a blade to keep them keep them sharp, so that you're always getting the best results out of them. So just a bit of, secateurs are often bought as presents for Christmas, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll buy something that actually isn't as good a present as you were hoping. So you're all very quiet tonight, and you haven't asked me any questions, so we're not going to go on for much longer. Has anybody got any questions? And I will try and answer those. One of the gifts that is very, well, I won't just try, I will answer them. One of the gifts that are very useful when you finally get stuck and you're not sure what to get a gardener is gift vouchers. So, we have our own vouchers, and then there's the national one, which is very good. It now comes as a little gift card, so that people can take amounts off them as they use them. And coming in the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be ones that you can top up as well, which is quite good. But at the moment, you've got plastic cards or our own cards, which you can use here. And we sell those on our website as well. So no questions from anybody. I guess probably a lot of people aren't going in the gardens as much at the moment as normal. So have I covered everything? One thing with the orchids, look out for these bags if you're buying an orchid for somebody, because it saves you trying to wrap them, and the plant just drops inside them, and it looks good. And if you're worried about keeping plants as presents, then you can give plant presents before Christmas. Anyway, and people won't mind, but we're increasing our range at this time of year, so you've got a bigger choice running up to Christmas, so you can buy fairly late. Poinsettias often get a little bit thin on the ground, thinner than other plants, but we found actually most people are buying poinsettias as presents for themselves and as part of their Christmas decoration rather than presents, but all the other plants make really good presents. So I will wish you a very Merry Christmas. And you can ask questions afterwards if you want to put questions. Even if you're watching this later, you can ask questions in the comments box, and we'll spot them and we'll give you an answer as quickly as we can. And just want to thank those of you who have been coming this year as customers in an extremely difficult year, and that hasn't changed with all the COVID restrictions on spacing and masks. But we thank you very much for coming this year, and we've got through it, and already we're seeing really good signs of encouragement for people to get in their gardens next year. We may not be doing our holidays as normal, but we're doing our best to make sure we get stocks in. You may have heard this week that containers are getting stuck out at sea and not coming in, and that's affecting garden furniture deliveries for next year. But it will arrive. It's on the sea, a lot of it already. So yeah, thank you, Eleanor, for your Christmas wishes. And what's Kay saying? Hey, let me go back. I'll just touch on this. This is a really good question. So if you've got the moth orchid, which is the one I had here, this is the Phalaenopsis. And when it's finished flowering, let me take this out of the packet. Excuse the noise. On the stems, you'll see down the stems that we've got these. You can just see that little, I call it like a scale. There's another one there. Okay, and that's where the flower buds come from. So when the flowers are finished, if you go down to the pot and count up from the bottom, 1, 2, 3 scales, cut that off there. So that's the first thing to do. And there's a bud in there. And there's a 50% chance it will reshoot from that bud and be back in flower within perhaps 4 to 6 weeks. Now, it's 50% whether it does it or not. So we've got one at home that's got one coming out of here, but it's also now throwing one from down at the bottom as well. That one's actually growing quicker than this one, so maybe that's taking over. But if that doesn't work, these will die back all the way down to the leaves. They will go like a straw color. And if it does do that, cut it right back down to here. Make sure you feed them, because they do like feed, and there are lots of orchid feeds to get them back into flower. Keep the compost moist as if you were growing them normally. Keep the leaves misted if you've not got them in the kitchen or the bathroom, and that will give them the right atmosphere. These roots that grow out of here, those are quite natural. That in the tropics, in the tropical rainforest, these grow. the plants grow in the clefts of branches. So if you imagine branches coming out here and here, they don't really have any soil or compost. So they've got some roots that cling onto the tree, and then they put these out because they absorb moisture and they actually take the humidity out of the atmosphere. So those should stay on, and they can look a bit untidy, but if you've got them in a pot cover, that should be fine. Get a pot cover that's a little bit bigger as well. So hopefully that helps you there, Kay. Certainly with moth orchids, I would keep them going as long as you can. We know customers who have got orchids that have been flowering every year for years and years and years, and they're so rewarding. As they get older, this has got 3 stems, you'll get 4 stems and 5 stems. They don't need repotting every year. As I said earlier, if you were here earlier, saying don't repot them until April. When it's new this year, you don't actually need to repot it until it's 2 or 3 years old. And then just going to one size up. They're always in these clear pots because the roots in the tropical rainforest are out in the light, and they do need the light of the roots. So even with a pot cover, light will get in. But repot them in clear pots and use orchid compost because it's got a good mixture of materials. Perfect for drainage but holding moisture. One last thing I would just mention, we're introducing a range of products from Variety People. We're putting under the title of Happy Planet. So it'll be a mixture of items that are in reduced plastic or no plastic, or been transferred from plastic to non-plastic. It'll be organic products. There'll be a few vegan products in there, but we'll put them together as a range of plants, and you'll see a logo, which we'll see soon, that you can then, if you want to go down the more environmental route, then we're featuring those more and more. We're hoping to launch it this year, but things took over. But we're already working on that now. So thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next year. I'll try and do these every 3 weeks because 3 weeks just seems to work on the way the seasons change and things can be doing. So somewhere around about 2nd or 3rd week of January, we'll come in there and start the season off. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you again for being there tonight and for being such great customers. Goodbye.